But, I mean, and I'm going to be perhaps a little bit dispassionate in my observation and comments because, I don't want this to become, too emotional. But, I mean, I first introduced the prospect of the false flag alien invasion at a talk I gave in Glastonbury, ironically, in July of 2007. Now, to the best of my knowledge, that's the first time that this prospect had been sort of introduced into the public arena. Well, there was a young man in the audience that day, a young man called Rik Clay, and unbeknown to me, this presentation I gave, which was entitled "Fool Me Once," this presentation I gave, where I introduced this all the history about false flag and looking at how false flag would most likely be used as the final step to establish the one world government, and that final step would be a false flag alien invasion launched at the London Olympics. Well, Rik went away from that event and obviously did his own research, and I guess it was about May of this year, he launched a blog. And, there's no question. I mean, he had come up with some very, very interesting insights to support, my conjecture of the possibility of the false flag alien invasion. And, I mean, it was almost a bit like a download. I mean, it was a bit abstract. I mean, there wasn't a lot of connectivity between the points he was making. I mean, it was almost as though, he'd suddenly had these remarkable insights and just decided that he needed to share them. So the blog was up for probably a couple of months or so, and then he did a couple of interviews. Shortly after I did an interview on the Red Ice Creations show. And obviously from that, I mean, he attracted a lot of interest. But then very suddenly his blog disappeared. And there was a lot of speculation on various forums as to what had happened and had he been warned off, had he got too close to the truth, etc., etc., etc. Well, this story unfortunately ends in tragedy because I learned just this morning, I was tipped off by an anonymous email that Rik had actually taken his own life. And in fact he was cremated earlier today. Now there's a lot of speculation going on right now as to what actually transpired, and we obviously don't know. I mean, I have been shown a link to a note that was apparently written by his mother prior to his death, and another one that was written shortly after. And it's very evident that Rik was quite ill, but he was with his family, and he was probably where he needed to be at that time. But the speculation and conjecture that his death is suspicious is, in my opinion, most likely ill-founded. I mean, I do not suspect any foul play here at all. What I do suspect, and I have taken another long look at Rik's blogs today. Now, Rik was a young man. He was 26, I think. And when I look at what he was putting up on the blogs and the sort of the style of which he's presented that information, it's not dissimilar to the tens of notebooks that I have got from, when I was, if you like, going through my own awakening process. I was tapping into who knows what, but, I was getting a lot of information that I didn't know what to do with. It didn't necessarily make a great deal of sense, but, I knew it was, well, one, it was interesting, and secondly, it might be something that I needed to follow up on later. So at the time, I was just putting it into notebooks, and I mean, I did this for about 3 years, because I had no idea, what this stuff meant, and, I knew it wasn't complete. I knew there was going to be more work that was going to be necessary to, bring it into some kind of meaningful presence. Well, I think that, what happened here is that, Rik had these phenomenal insights, and because of his youth, perhaps he wasn't able to integrate the experience. And I think, perhaps what has occurred here is an illustration that, when you start to become aware of what is really going on behind the charade that we are presented with as life in the Western world, it is a shock. It's a shock to the system.
It is.